Hey everybody, Victor here from the editing bay. Before we get into the actual conversation Darren and I have regarding the most recent episodes of MurderBot, I did want to mention something that we get wrong, or I got wrong, in this conversation. We discussed at the very end in preparation for next week's conversation about the 28 movies, 28 days later, 28 weeks later, and of course the upcoming 28 years later. I mentioned that notoriously 28 days later is very hard to find. By the way, 28 weeks later available on Hulu right now, very popular streamer. And at one point it was not available digitally at all. You had to watch a DVD and there were no DVDs for sale. It was only legacy DVDs. Anyway, this was one of those notoriously popular films that was very hard to find. In my research post-conversation, I discovered a couple things. First of all, this film was released digitally finally at the end of 2024, so you can rent it or buy it digitally right now. But more importantly, just within the past day or two, someone smartly decided to buy the rights to the film and release it on a streamer. So at least in the US, it is available on Pluto TV, which is free to everybody, but you have to watch ads. I'm not sure if Pluto has it everywhere around the world, but do check other fast streamers. I assume there will be similar streaming opportunities in those bigger territories. Anyway, so I've been wanting to watch that film in quite some time and we're not aware it's available digitally. It is indeed available to stream on Pluto and of course to rent via Apple, Amazon, Vudu, and whatever digital platform you happen to purchase your movies through. All right, let's get into that conversation. Welcome everybody to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we'll be discussing MurderBot, catching up mid-season here, episodes 3, 4, and 5, since we haven't been really covering the show in the past few weeks. Very short episodes, so kind of a good time to be catching up with the show. Let me introduce myself. I'm Victor, your host, and joining me again for this conversation is Darren.
G'day, Victor.
And also in our conversation, Darren, if you had a chance to see this, either way, I'll discuss it here on the podcast. The new Hulu original movie. I thought this was going to be a mini-series, actually a movie, an anime Predator film.
I watched it last night.
Nice. Predator, Killer of Killers. Mm-hmm. And it is actually, the reason I was confused that it would be a series was because it had promoted itself as an anthology, and it indeed is an anthology, a very evenly timed episode, so it could have actually been chopped up into vignettes or even to like mini episodes, kind of like MurderBot has been chopped up. But this was always intended as a movie, not released in theaters. But for anybody who isn't familiar with this, by the way, Dan Trachtenberg, former podcaster, and now little by little building up quite a resume of science fiction films, and really an adept director, has now directed Prey, which went directly to Hulu during the pandemic, and now this follow-up movie. But his next film, Predator Badlands, which is coming out this Christmas, is indeed going to be a theatrical release. So something to look forward to later this year. Before we get to all of that, Darren, I did have an email we had requested last week in our wrap-up of our coverage of Mobland. If anyone wanted to email us, appreciating the show a little bit more than we did. And we did get an email.
Great.
And I am trying to pull it up.
And there's still no news whether Mobland's got a season 2. It feels like
no announcement.
Season finishes, then you know everyone's watching it. It feels like that's got attention, and it's a good time to announce the next season, but not yet.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by that, to be honest. Paramount has an overall deal with the Butterworth brothers, who already did The Agency, which had a huge premiere. And that show seemed to fade, but they are definitely committed to doing more seasons of those. As a matter of fact, during the upfronts, Michael Fassbender and most of the cast were on stage and were discussing not shooting season 2, although they were about to start shooting season 2, but the scripts for season 2. So they were well in pre-production for season 2. And this was just as season 1 was wrapping up. So you have that deal. And then, of course, their second overall deal with the same producer brings a hugely successful. The first week was, I think, Paramount's biggest streaming week ever for the first episode of Mobland. And according to the companies that track the viewership, the streaming for streaming shows, it has been a very successful show. It's always in the top five, and every week, by the way, the last few weeks I've been tracking those ratings. It's been increasing like by 5%. I think in the finale week it jumped like 20%. So to your point, usually when a show is building momentum like that, like for example when Severance was ending season 2 as its ratings were climbing even before the finale, as another way to just kind of grab a headline and generate some more interest, they announce the renewal of the subsequent season. So yeah, the fact that the show's wrapped up and apparently been very successful, and no announcement, not before the finale, not after the finale, not after they announced the ratings for the finale. I'm like, I don't know. It seems like this maybe isn't going to happen. Maybe they just can't get the talent here. These are all busy actors. Maybe they just can't get them all to be in the show together.
That's curious. Yeah, well, you'd think Tom Hardy is in demand everywhere, and
Yep.
also Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren. I mean, yeah, I don't know about the rest of them.
It's funny that Tom Hardy is definitely a star, even though other than the Venom films, he really hasn't had any kind of real signature blockbusters. But he definitely draws a crowd. And I think the proof is in the pudding in the fact of the Havoc movie, which I know you just saw recently. But
Oof.
the ratings, first of all, it's like the Netflix publishes their ratings every single week. And not only has that been one of the biggest films they've ever had, but week over week, unlike a lot of other Netflix films, which fall off the charts very quickly after a big splashy debut, it's still in there like 8 weeks later. And it keeps having very steady viewership. And it's already has like over 100 million views or something. So that is definitely not only a stylish trailer for that film, which it obviously had, but I think that's definitely Tom Hardy having some star power to draw the audience. So he definitely can draw an audience. So he is the sticking point here to negotiating for another show, because honestly, you can get rid of some of these other high profile actors, but you probably can't have another show without Tom Hardy for sure.
Yeah, correct.
I don't know if you want to say anything about Havoc now that you've seen it.
I was in it for a little bit, but I mean, just the murky CGI every time it happened, it just pulled me out of it. All the backgrounds, all the vehicles, the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't on board with that, but I really love Tom Hardy. He's just so grizzled and he just inhabits this kind of underworld really well, which I liked. And I liked there's a big action sequence in the middle, which was incredible. I
The
just
club
love the
is
way they
incredible. Yeah.
Oh, so good. It's worth seeing just for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just the way they cut action as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
someone falls in one shot, then you see it in a reverse shot where something else is happening. I mean, it's so well done, very well choreographed, but I couldn't stick it the whole film. But I did notice the cabin in the woods, Evil Dead
Yes.
style
Mm-hmm.
fight near the end as well, which was pretty cool. But just I really dislike that type of CGI where it's in every shot, and
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
just pulls me out of it. Yeah.
The CGI blood in general, this is my problem I have with perfect example of this was the Evil Dead Rise recently
Hmm.
had very, very positive reviews. And the Fede Alvarez's reboot of the Evil Dead from 2014, I think it is now about 10 years ago now, which kind of launched his very successful career. That film did not get very good reviews. And I really, despite all the really positive reviews, I really did not love the most recent Evil Dead film. And I love Fede Alvarez's incredibly brutal reboot from about 10 years ago. And I think the big differentiator is that he did everything practical in that film. And I don't like all the CGI in the new, especially in a horror film. And I think that with action films, it doesn't bother me as much. And that's probably what you butted up against here. In horror movies, I am exactly where you are. I'm like, if there's CGI in a horror movie, I'm like, how do I buy into like the terror of the situation when it's obviously like the blood spatter, everything is CGI. It's like, what is going on? And I do see that in this particular film, which is not a horror movie, but feels like one sometimes. The Havoc film in that nightclub scene, which is incredible. Which that's the scene I think I told you when I recommended it to you that I literally rewound that as soon as it ended. I rewound it to the beginning and watched it again because it was just jaw dropping. The choreography of that. It is like one of those John Wick film scenes shot in a club, but even more so. Like it's like takes it to another level. Incredible. And if nobody watches anything else, you should just watch that one scene minimally. Have you seen Gangs of London?
I have not.
I was meaning to recommend it a few times. First of all, if you like Mobland and you want something twisty, where it really fascinatingly, a gang war breaks out between these London gangs because the head of the gang, of one of the gangs, is murdered, but it's an accident. Like they're murdered by some drug dealers, low level drug dealers. And then in covering things up, they make it accidentally look like it is another gang. And then from there, this gang war spirals out. It's the first reason you might want to see that. It's actually more of what you would expect from Mobland, to be honest, but more of what I expected. Second reason I recommend it is because it is from the same director as Havoc and has crazy fight sequences, like slow motion fight sequences where people's limbs are being taken off with machetes. It's like absolutely insane. So it has a lot of that action, very heightened action, especially in season two, which is not as good as season one. Season one is really, really good. Season two, not as good. But and third reason to recommend it is now it's on Netflix. So it was not very easily available. It was on AMC, and I think it was on a smaller British streamer. But now it's on Netflix, so anybody can watch it. And it was in the top 10 on Netflix when it first popped up there. But if you haven't caught up with it, I think it's available everywhere. And if you liked Mobland, and if you liked Havoc, or if you appreciated the best parts of it at least, do check out Gangs of London.
Gangs of London. Yeah, right.
Okay, now the email. So first of all, this is from Mark out in Lansing, Michigan. Mark, by the way, has emailed me before, and I just noticed in our thread here of conversation, Mark, if you're listening, that we haven't emailed each other since we talked about Slow Horses season two. So it's been quite some time. Slow Horses is coming back for season 5 now. Season 4, 5. I forget which one we're up to now. Soon. Very entertaining. But he mentions, thanks for covering Mobland. As far as I know, you are the only podcast covering it regularly in any detail. Well, that's the big selling point for for our podcast, I guess. On your recent episode, you asked if anyone loved or even liked Pierce Brosnan and/or Helen Mirren's performances. Well, I certainly don't love their performances. They both seem to be having a wonderful time playing outrageous, despicable characters. Mirren, in particular, seems to take great delight in playing a baddie rather than, say, her usual queen or aristocrat. As for the show, I'm a sucker for both gangster movies, shows, and almost anything with a British setting, and Mobland has both. It is a good, though certainly not great show with the potential to be even better. Agreed, 100%.
That's true. Yeah, for sure.
I love the final episode and hope it bodes for an even better season 2. Thanks for all you do with the podcast. Thank you, Mark, by the way. So yeah, Mark, maybe in my mind, I was thinking about Gangs of London. If you have not caught that one, you enjoyed this, I think absolutely a recommendation for people like Mark. And loved hearing back from you, Mark. Reach out to us anytime.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to receive emails like that because it also gives us a little bit different perspective on the show. If other people, if listeners are liking it more than us, then maybe we should pay a little bit more attention and maybe we'll be a bit more interested in finding the good parts of it. But in saying that, I still thought Mobland was supremely entertaining, even though we didn't like parts of it.
Sure.
But still, especially towards the end, I couldn't wait for each episode to see what would happen next.
And the other thing I want to mention is that even when I get frustrated, that I feel like, there's such an opportunity with something like Mobland to make something a little more unique. And I feel like they didn't really take enough risks. At the same time, I completely appreciate how hard it is to put a show on TV, to line up everything, to get your scripts approved, to break a story, there are strikes going on, of course, and all these other things going on in the world, and to just successfully put off the show. I hope that even when I'm being critical, the only time I get actually angry is when I feel someone just being lazy. Like sometimes I see a comic book film or a series where they spend $500 million or something, and I'm like, did anyone even read these scripts? Like, what is happening? Like, that gets me really angry. But sometimes when it's just like not quite clicking, you cast people, it's not quite working, the chemistry is not there. These are things, that are hard to perfectly do. So not only that, I do appreciate even when things don't work 100%, try to see the best of it. But also, to your point, Darren, I think sometimes different strokes for different folks, right? Like, so things that I find annoying, like we've seen this in conversations on social media, that I think Helen Mirren's performance is too campy, maybe for the tone of the rest of the show. And people are like, I'm tuned in for her performance, right? So, hey, it's working for somebody, right? And the ratings indicate that there is word of mouth around the show because if you see a show, it's growing week over week, that's not just hype or a lot of advertisement. That is people telling each other to watch it. That's the only way you see these things growing. Severance, for example, or The White Lotus, that is people chatting and other people wanting to know what they're talking about, and then they tune in the next week. I think that it indicates that they did something right, even if it wasn't exactly my cup of tea. Okay, for this week, let's start with, I think it's a relatively short conversation, although not a negative one. Predator, Killer of Killers. I was really surprised by this. First of all, if you are a fan of Predator, my opinion, you're going to love this because all these people that have said like, "Oh, I'd love to see the Predator fighting like a samurai. I'd love to see a Predator fighting a Viking, like traveling through time and fighting all these different people in these different eras." Well, here you go. You have it. You get to see that, which is almost like a comic book type concept. Second of all, there are some interesting themes here about this kind of perpetuation of violence. Within these vignettes, there is this vengeance that is being sought and how it has these negative consequences. So they do some interesting character development within these little vignettes. And I'm not going to spoil anything here, but it actually ties it all together very interestingly at the end as well. So I really enjoyed this. The script is a little rough here and there, but man, the action I thought was so fantastic in this show. And the animation, very interesting as well. What'd you think of it, Darren?
Incredible. Yeah, I was a little bit put off at the animation at the very start. I wasn't
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
sure what
Yeah.
kind of style they were going for. But the first story was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. Loved the characters. Absolute badass characters that they brought into this show. And then I think my favorite was the second.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. Same.
are they episodes? The second kind of chapter in the story
Mm-hmm.
where it is a samurai fight, and it's almost no dialogue throughout the whole
Yep.
of that
Mm-hmm.
half-hour episode. Absolutely loved it. Yeah, fascinating. I love Predator. The first Predator was probably one of my favorite films as a kid. I think it was the first real violent movie that my parents let me see, and I convinced them somehow to let me see it. So I've got a long history with this character, and it's really good to see someone do something really good with it, like with Prey, which I was a massive fan of. Now, before that, I think there was a remake, Predator or Predators or something. I quite
There's so
don't quite
many.
understand. Yeah, I mean, maybe you can do a big retrospective like you did with Alien. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
if you're as
Yeah.
interested in the character because it goes through so many different styles and different directors and different people having a say. This person, Dan Trachtenberg, I think
Mm-hmm. Yes.
he's got a big say in it, and
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's really cool to
They've
see what
given him
he's
the
doing with
franchise.
it.
Yeah, they've given him the franchise, which is amazing.
How do you get that? That's incredible. I mean, what has he done before to get the keys to this?
Well, he's got a really interesting story. He was a podcaster years ago trying to break into the industry. Remember that video game Portal where you could like shoot portals and then jump through them? I don't know if you remember this game. It was like a platformer basically that you could play, and it was just so easily available. You could just play it in your browser as well. Just as a proof of concept, he made a portal. You could probably watch this on YouTube. It's very short, but it's like a portal as if you are the person jumping through from one area to the other in this portal, video game, basically inside the video game. Then for years after that, there was interest in getting something off the ground with him. He never got anything produced, nothing. And then he eventually, I mean, this was probably like 7 or 8 years where he had nothing produced at all. And then he made, what's the J.J. Abrams anthology movies with the giant aliens? Cloverfield. He made
Oh yeah.
Cloverfield Lane.
I haven't seen it. Okay, saw the
Oh, you've
original
never seen
Cloverfield.
that? Oh,
Yeah,
you really
no.
should. You should watch that. It's really good and really surprising. The script is by Damien Chazelle before he did Whiplash, by the
Oh,
way.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it has Mary Lisbon
Oh,
with.
yep.
You should check this
It's
out.
good.
First of all, I don't want to even spoil that movie for you. You should check it out. It is a psychological thriller. she is inside of a bunker with one of these bunker preppers who's played by John Goodman, playing this very kindly dad character, but maybe in a crazy rapist, possibly as well. Like this very interesting, like you don't know how to read this character at any time. Like, is he supposed to be helping her, hurting her? And he's just like, you can't go outside. There's been an alien invasion. And she's like, do I believe this is true or not? So it's all happening inside this bunker. It's really, really tense. Incredible first film for anybody to make. And this put him on the map. He then, almost immediately after that, shot an episode of Black Mirror. And
Okay.
then after that, years after that, actually, he finally got that Prey movie. And then that was such a huge success, ratings wise, although it wasn't released theatrically, that they basically said, here you go. Here, you have the Predator series from now on. So congratulations, Dan Trachtenberg.
It was stunning that that Prey movie wasn't released in the cinema. I mean, it was one of my favorite movies of the year. I remember seeing the trailer, had no idea it was a Predator movie, and then at the end there
Right.
was a little bit of a
Yeah.
tease, and I was shocked. I was like, they're bringing it back.
Yeah.
The characters come back. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to Badlands that's coming up. And apparently there's different styles of predators. There's different styles in this animated Killer of Killers, and
Yeah.
I think the Badlands. I think I've seen a teaser, and it's a different style. You know, the face is different, and
Mhm.
yeah, there's so many places to go with it. It's very cool. I'm on board.
Yeah, they've opened this world up and in a very intriguing way. And it's funny because they have tried this before with the Predator franchise. And I honestly think that up until now, the Predator is literally a franchise that exists because this is like the Species, a more successful version of the Species franchise, where it's like everybody likes the concept. So they keep trying to reboot it, but it's really not worked out, other than Predator 1, which of course is a classic. But I remember I saw Predator 1 in movie theaters. I was too young to see it. I think it was R rated. I'm pretty certain it was R rated, but I saw it multiple times in theaters. I guess my local theater did not check our IDs or anything. I guess we didn't have IDs, right? So they couldn't check it anyway. I did have a mustache at like 10, so maybe they just assumed that I was of age, or maybe they just didn't care. Either way. But I remember me and my friends going to see it, and we loved it. And we also were big fans of Arnold. We like grew up in that era where Arnold was the coolest. As much as I loved and literally saw it in theaters multiple times, I remember when Predator 2 came out and what a massive disappointment that was, because that was not very good. But we lined up to see it first day, and of course, it was not as good as we expected. And then, yeah, since then, they've tried to extend the franchise. They've rebooted it with Predators, which was okay. Robert Rodriguez was involved with that one.
Was that the one where they were all dropped on the
On a
one planet and
planet,
they had to
yes.
work together and they
Yes.
realized that each person had a skill? Yeah, I thought that was a really cool idea,
Yeah.
but
It didn't
yeah.
quite work. Yeah. And I did not see the Predator reboot from about 5 or 6 years ago, which Shane Black did right after Iron Man 3. And I love Shane Black, but I heard such bad things about it that I just never even got around to seeing it. Maybe I will, to be a completist, like to your point, maybe I will do like a franchise retrospective. But of course, in between there, they had to do the Alien versus Predator thing, which was that's just where they just like, hey, these both of these creatures look cool. Let's have them fight each other. And
And
that's
it was
the
always on
brief.
Earth, wasn't it? It's like,
Yes,
why do they
yeah,
have to
right,
fight each other on Earth with human characters?
right, exactly. I'm kind of an apologist for the first one just because like some of the stupid fights are kind of fun. The second one is a murky mess. It's just like you hate murky CGI. That's when CGI wasn't even that good. That second film was an absolute disaster, and basically killed that franchise as well. But yeah, I mean, it's back from the dead once again, and I mean, so far, I think they have a winner here. So far, I mean, I think they're the expansion of the mythology here. I think is expanding in very interesting ways. I like that there's some kind of morality to the predators as well, right? Like we already know that they only attack people who are armed. We've seen that in the previous films, but it really is like killer of killers, right? If you are the supreme killer, if you're the alpha, well, let's go head to head, right? So I really like that. And to your point, I love that second sequence where it's a very different fighting style, right? You have the Viking chapter where it's like very brutal and very bloody, but then that second one, the ninjas are all who are fighting for the legacy of that samurai armor,
Mm.
but it's all very stealth fighting. And I love that. And I love that the predator is stealthily following him the whole time. Like you see different moments where the predator is present during their fight. And I thought that was very, very cool. Yeah, really, really well done.
So cool. And even the third part where it's a different time again. It's like
Yeah.
a World War II type of thing with
Yeah.
airplanes and it's a different kind of fight. I thought that opened it up again. It's just showing you things that you didn't really know that you wanted to see. And different predator technology as well is cool.
Yeah.
And I don't want to spoil the last part, but yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm not
cool.
gonna. Yeah, that's the one thing I don't want to talk about is that how they tie these things together is very, very
Yeah.
cool. I really enjoyed this, and I think I mean sci-fi fans will definitely like this. Of course, if you're a Predator fan, I don't know if you're new to the franchise, it's going to be an entry point for anybody. But if you have even a passing, I mean, honestly, if you just like the first Predator film, if you only like the first Predator film and you really don't know anything about the franchise, you don't have to see all the other stuff. Just go right to Prey on Hulu, and then from Prey go to this anthology film, which honestly might be some connective tissue with what we're going to see in the next film as well.
It's got to be, right? Because if
Yeah.
it's the same creator, then yeah, there's got to be elements that are going to lead into this Badlands film.
Well, there's a direct connect. When once again, no spoilers here. The direct connection in this movie to Prey, right? So we'll just leave it there.
Just on that animation style, it seems
Oh yeah,
like
on
the
the twos,
Spider-Verse.
on the twos. Yeah, that's what they call it. So it creates that stuttering style, which people. It's funny. People hated that look. Some animation fans hated that look, but I guess after Spider Verse, everybody loves it now because we've seen it in the new Puss in Boots movie, and we've seen it here.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that, but yeah, it did remind me of Spider-Verse, and I must
Yep.
say, I did see that Puss in Boots movie in the cinema, and I was really impressed with it. So
Yeah, me too.
I might have to do some research into that style of animation if yeah, if that's the future.
Yeah, it's been in the Puss in Boots movie specifically, which is interesting. The action scenes would go into that style. It's a very interesting choice. So it would be on the ones, and then in the action scenes, it goes into on the twos, and you get that kind of stuttering effect.
Yeah, I took
Interesting
the
that
young kid to see that film, and I didn't have high hopes for it, but I was like, yeah, this is sick.
I took my daughter to see it, and she was knocked out, and I was like, "Yeah, it was good. You're right." Oh, I remember the thing I was going to mention. If anybody watches this movie and likes that World War II segment, it reminded me very heavily. I haven't talked about this on the podcast, but in another anthology on Netflix called Love, Death, and Robots. And in this current season, I was not that impressed. That's why I haven't brought it up again on the podcast. I wasn't that impressed with this current season, but there is an episode called How Zeke Found Religion, I think it's called. And it's a World War II mission to bomb a church in Nazi Germany. And they're apparently like raising a demon. And it turns out these guys in this bomber end up going to battle this demon. It is so good. They're literally like machine gunning at this demon, and the demon has these really crazy powers, really disturbing stuff. It is very cool. And like I said, really not a great season of that show, but do check out that one segment. I highly recommend How Zeke Found Religion. I think that's what it's called, but it
Yep, it's
is,
episode 8. It says season 4, episode 8. How's
yeah,
Zeke got religion?
excellent. So yeah, check that out if you did like this animated segment. It reminded me of it in ways. The plot's very different, but some of the stylistics and some of the battle sequences reminded me of it. All right, Darren. So
MurderBot.
we have not talked about Murderbot in a few weeks. When last we saw Murderbot here or discussed it here on the podcast, he was about to be snuck up on by one of these other reprogrammed, we have discovered along the way, Murderbots. The cliffhanger for episode 4 was that he had started to download that, as is the case with this group of scientists in this crew, they have some very funny slapstick battle sequences, by the way, but do help Murderbot defeat this rogue robot. And he eventually shoots himself in the chest to stop the download from going through. But they have done the honorable thing, and they rather than deprogramming him or decommissioning him or leaving him behind for scrap, they have tried to rescue him. And in this current episode, a few things have turned out. One, he is back awake again. Second of all, they've removed this malware from him. And third of all, he may have a love interest here. So here
I
we are,
love the new
mid season.
character.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun. I like her how she has apparently thought more than a little bit about the possible sexual abilities of these robots.
She's going to be so disappointed when she sees what's underneath his pants.
Well, you don't know what he's going to program himself to. Who knows when he goes back in there next time. He something happened when she gave him this peck on this week. So
What did he
so
say? He wanted to be melted into scrap.
what do you how are you liking this show so far? Is it
Oh, it's
still
so
keeping?
fun. I can't stand the way that they go to these cliffhangers because I
Yeah.
just want more MurderBot. It's so short. The episodes look so expensive, but they're so fun. But yeah, I really like the new character. And she brings something different because the this guild or whoever they are, they're so friendly and they talk everything through and they try to do the right thing when you really just want someone just to stuff things up a bit. Um, but yeah, it's cool. Skarsgård's killing it, but I just want
Yeah.
more. I just want more Murderbot, and I think the next episode is going to be the last one.
Is it? No, I think there's five more. Five. I think we're only
Five
mid.
more. Oh, brilliant. Oh,
I think we're
okay,
mid
excellent.
season. No, I
Okay,
think we're
good.
just mid season.
Oh,
Yeah.
good, good. Yeah, I thought there was only six. I was shocked.
And by the way, I have finished the book. I finished the book because at one point I felt like the storyline was going so far apace of where the book went. But actually, no, it's all kind of come back into the book itself. There's a lot of additional context, like this character, this new character they've brought in. She's not in the book. There's a lot of his observations. There's a lot of stuff that they've padded out. A lot of the interpersonal scenes, like you don't see anything in the story. The novel's very short, so you don't really see anything that's not in his from his perspective. So the whole idea of like where you see their leader, their captain, and her kind of crisis of faith, and her kind of embracing her fear and going forward. And like I said, the cast really early on in the show, the remainder of the crew was even though I like the actors in general, weren't really doing anything for me. I kind of felt like they were just padding out the plot. But they've actually kind of come into their own. I really do like the guy who's trying to be more stereotypically male. He's just like, why do I feel this way? He's like kind of embracing his traditional masculinity, but he's just not good at it. He like knocked himself out this week or last week with with that gun blast, which I thought was hilarious. So it is funny to see. And by the way, going back to your idea of like what this is saying maybe about gender roles, I definitely do think there is some kind of commentary here on that as well, which is also a little interesting. Maybe a little too early to analyze it too deeply, but I do think that that is something else that they're playing here. Because of course, I think one of the most interesting things about Murderbot is that he is the stoic John Wayne type on the surface, like he barely communicates with them. Meanwhile, in his own mind, he's just watching soap operas. Right? So it is an interesting duality there to his character.
And I
He
think it's
is the
interesting
Murderbot.
that he's watching these soap operas, but there is a soap opera playing out in front of him
Sure.
with the throuple and with the
Exactly.
as these
Yes.
characters come
Right.
in, and now he's got a love interest, which is going to be comedic. So yeah, it's hilarious.
And he's also, of course, the two things that are very funny, as you mentioned, that there is all this melodrama in front of him that he's not appreciating because he just wants to go back to watching his soap operas, which is artificial melodrama, which is a very funny irony, of course. And then, of course, the second aspect, despite the fact that this is just melodrama, when they're asking him earlier, like, how did you know to calm down the other crew member when, her friend was attacked by the giant creature on the. I learned it from watching the soap opera, so it's like he's learning how to act like a human from watching these cheesy soap operas as well. I like how they prove that he is trustworthy or not. David Del Dismalchian
Yeah, yeah.
character, Goran, when he is saying, well, he obviously is hiding his actual nefarious activities, showing that he's actually watching all these soap operas. And then they test like some obscure plot point, which he knew about. They're like, no, he's seen them all. It's still a lot of fun. But like you
I
said, I,
s-
I don't understand why this is so dragged out. Honestly, why are they
yeah, for
dragging this out?
sure. I mean, give us 40-minute episodes at least,
Easy. Right,
just a
right.
double. Come on. But I still think there's a real allegory with like neurotypical or neurodivergent people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, which is I find super interesting. just because, one of my kids maybe is showing some signs of this kind of thing, or they mask when they're at school, and then when they get home, things just come out of them because
Mhm.
they're trying to play a role. But in Murderbot's role, you hear the internal monologue of what's going on. So you actually
Exactly.
hear
Yeah.
what he's really feeling, but he still has to play this role of sec unit. But I can't wait to find out when they find his real name or he calls himself Murderbot. I really want to see that happen.
I mean, of course, there's also a mystery developing here, as to who is really responsible for this attack. It is interesting that, of course, they didn't just, he makes a really valid point where they're saying, like, oh, the company itself is, they sent us out here to be murdered. And he's just like, well, if I was going to murder you, I would just poison your food and make it look like an accidental death. And also, he mentions, of course, the fact that if your clients start dying on your watch, then of course it's really bad for business. So the company's not responsible for this, but somebody else is. And that person, of course, is trying to take over the sec units to kill off these scout groups. They are trying to cover their own tracks by making it look like the sec units went rogue rather than leaving their fingerprints behind. And I guess there's a question here. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is the question I'll ask you right now. On the one hand, you can imagine this new character that maybe she is one of these double agents, and that, but she plays it off as, I can't imagine this is a nefarious character considering her reaction to the sec unit right now.
I can't see that either. I mean, she's being so naive about everything. Yeah, everything comes out of her. She doesn't hide anything. So
Right,
every
right.
thought that she has, she says, no matter how embarrassing. Yeah, I'd be surprised at that, but it feels like the world is still a bit small. We need
Yeah.
more. She was a welcome addition because we were so stuck with this group. Um, but yeah, I feel like we're going to see more of these evil black sec unit or whatever they are that kind of command the other sec units. Yeah, so I'm keen to see what happens.
And by the way, that is in the animation we saw earlier on that you pointed out, that look, that kind of claymation look to the title sequence. Those aren't aliens that it's fighting, right? It's those other rogue sec units, right? Although in the black armor,
And there's lots of them.
lots of them. Yeah, exactly. So there might be more to that, obviously, before the end of the season. Oh, speaking of expanding the world, something that also that is not in the book at all, which I thought was very cool, that it shows that there is going to be some expansion to this story, is this flashback to him being printed, right? And you actually get to meet how this is being done. The organic elements of the murder bots are made in this giant factory. People are responsible for making different parts of the body. This was an interesting aspect to it, which is interesting that they're just even introducing the broader universe and how these murder bots are made, and maybe some of the politics of that. They obviously want to extend this into a multiple season show, I believe.
And the fact that when they're making them, they consider them to be human. He
Right,
doesn't consider himself to be human, but all his crewmates, they consider him to be human and they
right.
actually say it. No, he is human. So, yeah, he's got to rectify that fact.
Yeah, and I mean, and Skarsgård is doing really such a beautiful job, I think, here. You see how they treat him better, and he still is looking at them. And this maybe goes back to that analogy you mentioned that is definitely being explored here, of maybe somebody on the spectrum, that they have this sense that they are outsiders and maybe intentionally not allowing themselves to interact emotionally with their characters. And then as he starts to warm to these folks, as they continuously keep calling him a person, and he's just maybe starting to believe it a little bit. So he's kind of discovering his own self.
And just the way that he aggressively avoids eye contact.
Yes, that's like one of every time someone's looking at him, he's looking away, which is great. So speaking of metaphors, potentially for the context of this show, you had brought up, maybe, just maybe, that this show is some kind of metaphor there for the this one white cis male who has been castrated, and how maybe that is some kind of metaphor for the status of the traditional white male in this story full of non-white and sometimes non-binary characters even. I don't know if you meant it mostly as a joke, but it did plant a seed in my mind. And I have been watching the show somewhat in that context, but it did make me think about how this show is actually dealing with some of those themes. And I have some things to say. Before I give you my thoughts on all that, did you want to clarify any of what I just laid out there?
I mean, it was a bit of a joke when I said it because that was an initial feeling I got from that pilot episode. But so yeah, I do think it is quite interesting, and I think that there might be something to it. But yeah, I'm interested in what you think.
It's funny. I told you off mic that I was going to do like a funny analysis, reading the series intentionally as like from like someone who one of these like right wingers who over is oversensitive to all the text and doing that like as a joke as we watch this show. And I never really went in that direction, but I did start think. I kept thinking about it. It was nagging at me. And then I started to piece some things together in my mind, which made a more cohesive argument, which I do think is intentional and actually made me appreciate the whole project here. Martha Wells, I believe, is the author, and her whole project here with the MurderBot character. So, first of all, let me take a step back here in the fact that I think that science fiction shows, especially like the Star Trek type shows, are basically modern Westerns, right? Like the Western used to be here we are, we're entering a harsh terrain, the dangers you'll encounter from the people you're traveling with. It asks questions about the existential questions about what will you do to survive. Of course, you have the outsiders that might be attacking, like the Native Americans, the stereotype of the angry Native Americans, of course, as these outsiders. And then you map that into all of the science fiction that came from the 50s, basically replaced the old Westerns, where, you know, you have uh, aliens instead of Native Americans, right? And you have the same kind of questions like, you know, now we're out in space, we're running out of oxygen. Who do we have to sacrifice? Who sacrifices themselves to rescue the rest of the squad? It's the same idea. It's a new frontier. It's a science fiction frontier rather than the West or the mythological West, which, of course, I'm not trying to state anything here that the Western is realistic at all. And as a matter of fact, it reinforced a lot of really ugly stereotypes. So I'm not, that's a much broader conversation to have. I'm just talking about like the tropes of that genre mapped onto science fiction. So then I'm thinking, well, this is very much like one of those type of shows. And then, hey, the show is very much winking at that, right? His favorite soap opera is basically like an analog for Star Trek, which of course is that whole same mythology I just outlined there. I'm thinking, okay, that's clever. There you are, show. You're like saying this is a more realistic version of Star Trek. He sees the fantasy version of Star Trek. That's the one that you see on TV. He's living a much less glamorous one, to the point you made before, where he has a soap opera in front of him, and he's watching one on TV and not recognizing that there's a similarity there. It is that there's such a disparity between the reality and the fantasy that he's not even aware of that he's living in this very situation. So that's one level of the irony. But more than that, I had just recently, filling in some blind spots, seen The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which I'd seen many, many years ago, like in film school, but I never went back to it. But I just watched it again recently. Have you ever seen that film by the chance?
No, I haven't.
That is specifically about the mythology of the West. And there is a John Wayne character. The West has now become not wild anymore, right? It is like there are towns, there is a teacher, there is, you know, a hospital. These thugs come into town and start disrupting everything, but they're actually being funded by a large corporation that wants to like drive these people out so they can build their railroad. Once again, very similar metaphor to this, like who is actually pulling the strings of trying to drive these people away. But it's also very much this idea that John Wayne is this minor spoilers for that movie, but John Wayne is simultaneously the guy who has to eventually stand up for the little guy, but there's no place in that world, this civilized world, for him anymore. Like he was the old guard. used guns to clear the land. But now that there's a community there, now that it's civilized, they don't have a use for him anymore. And two things that are ironic about that is the murder bot is the John Wayne character, right? He's the guy who's surrounded by like these liberals who are trying to like, we're scientists and we're, doing this, we have this much more cultured world. They are not ready to be in this Wild West. So he has to be the traditional stereotypical male character to defend them, to allow them to stake a claim. But of course, the irony is that in this version of the story, he is silent to them. He is the strong, silent male character. But in his own mind, he is a continuously running, very catty critique of all of them. And he just wants to watch soap operas, right? So the show is very much like taking a Who Shot Liberty Valance template and saying that imagine that John Wayne in his head was having like a very bitchy commentary on all the people in that movie. And really just when he guys went home, he just wanted to watch soap operas or maybe read like romance novels in the context of a movie set in the 1890s. Anyway, so I think there is definitely something there as how she's exploring some of the mythologies of the West in this very contemporary or science fiction context.
That's so good. That's great.
And I definitely think they're playing with that. And it enriched the text a little bit for me. So I think it's fun to see this John Wayne character kind of saying like, hey, these obnoxious hippy dippy people around me, maybe they're the good guys after all.
The fact that the cast is so diverse, but
Yeah.
it's for a reason. To actually use it for a real specific reason, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, it's a fun take on the material there. All right, Darren, next week, I think we are primarily going to discuss maybe Danny Boyle's career in general.
Oh, wow. Yeah, cool.
And Alex Garland, intersecting, of course, here as well. We've talked about him on the podcast here numerous times now. In preparation for 28 years later, we will be rewatching 28 days later and 28 weeks later. So my history with this franchise, by the way, I have seen 28 days later many times, and it is not available to stream. I have seen 28 weeks later only one time ever, and didn't really love it that much, although I've heard very positive things about it. So I definitely need to rewatch it. That one, by the way, is available to stream very easily on Hulu or Disney Plus with Hulu. Pretty easy to watch. As a matter of fact, I think it is the number 3 streaming movie in the world right now because everybody's probably watching that one to catch up in preparation for what's going to be probably a massive hit. I think there's over 100 million views on the trailer for 28 Years Later, which is, I think, the second most viewed horror movie trailer of all times behind only It. And that It movie made $700 million. So
wow.
if it performs similar to that, it would probably be one of the most successful horror movies of all times. We'll see if Danny Boyle can make a massive comeback with this film. Darren, have you seen these movies, I assume?
Yeah, look, I saw the first one in cinemas. I feel like it was one of the first films that was shot all on a digital camera, or one of these films that really pushed digital filmmaking forward. And it was shot super low budget as well. And the way they did
it was the
these things.
prosumer. I literally had one of these cameras they shot on. It was like it wasn't even like the high end HD cameras. It was like a prosumer camera that I think the one I bought cost me like $700 or $800, which was a lot of money back then. But for me anyway, but $700 or $800. So they're shooting a movie like on multiple $800 cameras, and it looks pretty darn good for being shot on such low tech.
Yeah, I remember it being groundbreaking, and it was fascinating to see in a cinema. The second one, like you, I think I've seen it once, but I don't remember anything about it. So
Jeremy
it's going to
Renner's in
be.
it. Rose Byrne is in it. That's all I remember.
Oh wow, okay. So didn't even remember that. So yeah, I'll look forward to giving that a rewatch. I mean, Danny Boyle's films are always worth, even his bad films are worth watching. He's just brings so much energy to them, and they're always interesting, and they're all very different as well. So yeah, looking forward to seeing 28 weeks and then Years. So Years comes out next week, I'm guessing.
Well, it comes out the subsequent week. So we'll be talking about 20. We'll be talking about the first two 28 movies, and probably talking about Danny Boyle's career in general. Very interesting career. And then the subsequent week, we will be digging into a long conversation talking about the new 28 movie. It's a planned trilogy. They've already started shooting the second movie, which is coming out in like January. So that one's coming very quickly. They have no funding for the third movie. They've only had funding for the one and two, but I am pretty sure if this movie makes anywhere near the kind of money they think it's going to make, that it is not going to have any problems funding the end of the trilogy. But Garland has apparently written has completed two scripts and has a third script, which is all outlined. So they have a trilogy planned here, a conversation about the movie, and how confident we feel about the storyline for the trilogy, the new trilogy. And that will be the week after that. And this Friday, by the way, Echo Valley on
Echo
Apple
Valley,
TV
yes.
Plus is premiering. The reviews have started coming in, by the way, Darren. And the reviews are
Oh,
saying that one is that this is a brilliant film with an incredible twist about the midpoint.
oof.
That's some of the reviews. The other reviews are starts off as a really intense psychological thriller and then turns into a very messy, kind of over the top film by the end. So it's very interesting to see these very disparate responses. But even the negative reviews say that the film has a great villain, something I like, and that either way, even if it goes off the rails, it could still be a very entertaining watch. And I'm looking forward to that. And Son and I will be discussing that on Friday, and it premieres on Thursday night on Apple TV Plus, or your morning, Darren. So
No, no, I've been looking forward to that. We're actually going away this weekend, so won't get a chance. Or maybe Sunday night. Maybe I'll get a chance to see that, but I'm looking forward to it. I've got the wife on board, so
nice.
yep,
I
yep.
think it'll be a good one for to watch with the wife. Me and my wife will definitely be watching that one. All right, Darren. Thank you again, as usual, for the conversation.
Thanks so much,
Very
Victor.
much looking forward to that conversation and checking out those films.
Cheers, mate. Okay, bye.